Hey guys, it's Crazy Boy Aaron, and like I do every year, I'm going to be ranking the books I read in 2020. There's a total of 11 books this year, not as much as last year, which was 15. I told you guys that I was still going to be doing these videos. By the way, sorry if this video is kind of late. I know I usually do this at the end of December, and it's January now, but I just really didn't get around to it till now, so you're getting it now. It's better than nothing. Here are all the books I read in 2020 ranked from worst to best. At number 11 is Diary of a Wimpy Kid. 15, The Deep End. Yes, this was the worst book I read in 2020. The Deep End is one of the laziest books I've ever read, and is without a doubt the worst Wimpy Kid book so far. The book is just another Heffley's Go on Vacation story, and I'm really getting tired of it. The book is also painfully unfunny. There wasn't a single joke that made me laugh. It seriously seems like Jeff Kinney put in as little effort as possible. It also has the worst ending out of any Wimpy Kid book. I really hope we don't get another road trip or vacation book where they go on this little adventure and everything goes wrong, because this is the third book to do this so far, and it got old by the time I read The Getaway. I absolutely would not recommend this book. At number 10 is Uniquely You. Yeah, an activity book was better than the latest Wimpy Kid book. Let that sink in. Really, the only reason this is not the worst book I read this year was because The Deep End was a bigger letdown than Uniquely You, because obviously it's an activity book, so I wasn't looking forward to it in the first place. Now granted, I wasn't looking forward to The Deep End either, but The Deep End could have at least tried to surprise me and try to do something different, and it didn't. So that's why The Deep End is the worst book I read this year. But just focusing on this book, I think it's an average activity book. It's not the best activity book I've ever read, but it's also not the worst. In my opinion, if you want an actual good activity book based on a pre-existing book series, may I recommend the Wimpy Kid DoItYourself book. And yes, I know the irony that I'm recommending a Wimpy Kid book after trashing a Wimpy Kid book, but yeah, this is the best activity book I've ever read. At number 9 is Babysitter's Little Sister 2, Karen's Roller Skates. Yeah, you guys already know from my review that I didn't like this book. The art is great, of course, as I said, for both of the Babysitter's Little Sister books. The art is great, but Karen's Roller Skates just felt like it was putting in the bare minimum. I will give it this. There were one or two jokes that were funny, but other than that, this book is pretty much just a waste of time. I would skip it if you're a Babysitters Club fan. At number 8 is the Babysitter's Little Sister, Karen's Witch. The reason that Karen's Witch was better was because it was just so goofy, and goofy in a good way. I mean, I think the goofiness in the story is what makes it enjoyable for me, and I wasn't expecting much. I mean, in fact, I wasn't even planning to get this book in the first place, but yeah, I'm actually kind of glad I did, because I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, it's not like a great book or anything. I wouldn't like super recommend it, but if you're a Babysitters Club fan, maybe check this out. Like I said, the art is great. Coming in at number 7 is Becoming Brianna. And yeah, if you saw my review, you know that I thought this was the worst Emmy and Friends book so far. Of course, not counting the activity book I just showed you. But yeah, I just thought that this reused a lot of ideas from Positively Izzy. There's a lot of good moments in this book, and it's not like a terrible book, but it's not a very good book. If you're a fan of the Emmy and Friends series, I'd say get it, but if you just want like a really good book, then I wouldn't recommend this. So yeah, I just think it reused a lot of ideas, but it was still like an enjoyable book. I wouldn't say I loathe my reading experience, but it's not a very good book. At number 6 is probably the most average book on this list, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales Wings of Fury, which is the prequel book to the game that came out earlier in November. And yes, I do have the game, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about the prequel book. So I read this before I got the game, and I thought it was pretty bland. It really just feels like your average Miles, or not really an origin story, because we don't see his origin story in this book, but it really just feels like the average Miles adjusting to being Spider-Man thing, and it's something we've seen like many times before, and there was nothing unique about this book. There's nothing that surprised me. If you're a fan of the video game or the first Spider-Man PS4 game, then I'd maybe say get this if you're actually interested in more story, but overall it's just not that great. So now we're going to transition over to the good books that I read this year. So these top 5 are the books that I would really recommend and were my favorites of 2020. With that being said, number 5 is the funniest book I read all year, Raleigh Jefferson's Awesome Friendly Adventure. Yeah, I'm just as surprised as you are that this is 5 on my list this year, because as I've made it very clear in the past, I really do not like Diary of an Awesome Friendly Kid, so as you can probably imagine, I was not looking forward to this book at all, but it actually surprised me. I mean, this ended up being probably the most surprising book of the year for me. And yeah, it was just the fact that it was really funny, it was really entertaining. I can honestly understand if someone didn't like this book, because there are actually quite a few people who don't like this book. And I can understand that, but for me, it's just, I found it funny. It was entertaining. So yeah, I'd say if you want a book to just pass the time and that doesn't take that long to read, then I'd recommend this book to you. At number 4 is the newest Babysitters Club book by the time I'm filming this, and it is the Babysitters Club 8, Logan Likes Marianne. This may not be the best Babysitters Club book, but it's also far from the worst. I wouldn't even say it's the best Gail Galligan book. That would have to go to Christie's Big Day. As always, Gail Galligan's art is fantastic, and it is really cute to see the relationship between Marianne and Logan. The fact that they both are crushing on each other, and Logan trying to get into the Babysitters Club. And, you know, it's a simple story. You know, it's your simple story about a crush, and I can honestly understand if you aren't really for this book, because this has been done like a million times before in graphic novels, and this isn't even it's not even the best portrayed version of like what a crush is like. But still, it's a good book that I read this year, and it's better than most of the books I read this year. At number 3 is Act by Kayla Miller. It seems that Kayla Miller is getting better with each book, because so far this is the best Kayla Miller book in my opinion. Yeah, it may be made for a younger audience, but that doesn't mean older people can't read it and enjoy it. It's about standing up for what you believe in and having the courage to do so. But yeah, there's nothing else for me really to say. I would recommend this book. It's pretty great. At the number 2 spot is Class Act. I thought Class Act was an improvement on New Kid, and keep in mind that my opinion has really changed on New Kid. If for those of you who saw my review, you know that I didn't think was that great at the time, but upon rereading New Kid before I got this book, I actually really like New Kid now. So that should tell you how good this book was. Class Act had something to say in regards to how some kids are more privileged than others, and how some people have to work twice as hard to be just as good And Drew, the main character, feels that this is not fair sometimes. So yeah, this book was really, really good. I recommend it. And I hope that there is a third book in the future, because I would very much look forward to that. And number one, my favorite book of 2020 is When Stars Are Scattered. This is a true story about two brothers who grew up in a refugee camp for 15 years. The older brother, Omar, takes care of his younger nonverbal brother, Hassan. And you get a look into what it was like to spend 15 years in a refugee camp and spend all those years waiting for their mother to come back and waiting to be accepted into America. I knew immediately after finishing this book that this was going to be really high on my list, like number 2 or 1, because no other book this year made me feel the same way as this book did. This is without a doubt Victoria Jameson's best book, and I actually kind of find that funny because if you guys have seen my reviews of Roller Girl and All's Fair in Middle School, you know that I've been very critical of Victoria Jameson, and yeah, I find it funny because she illustrated this book, but she didn't write it. I would 100%, if there was one book I'd recommend, this is the book. When Stars Are Scattered is one of the best books I've ever read, and without a doubt my favorite book of 2020. So let me know what your favorite book of 2020 was. Once again, I'm sorry it's been a while since I've made a video. I'm still trying to figure out what to do on this channel in terms of content. I'm gonna need a lot more time with that because I still have I have no idea what I could be doing. I have little ideas here and there, so no matter how long it takes, I will come back to YouTube eventually. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, and have a good night.